Chapter 1. The Cabin in the Ocean. The world smelled of salt and silence. Morning light slipped through the narrow windows of Tara's cabin, painting silver streaks on the worn wooden floor. Waves licked at the stilts beneath her home, their low, endless rhythm the only heartbeat she trusted. Out here, miles from any shore, she was both forgotten and free. She flexed her right hand, 6 fingers spreading like a secret she never asked to carry. The council had called it a curse, a bad omen. Her own uncle, her only blood, had whispered it to them first. That whisper had grown into a verdict, and the verdict had carried her to exile. It should have felt like death. Instead, she had learned to live with the water and the wind. The gulls became her neighbors. The moon became her only witness. Some nights she told herself that she preferred it this way, that quiet was safer than the sharp edges of the pack's judgment. But even in quiet, memory lingers. She remembered the look on her uncle's face the day they dragged her to the pier. He didn't flinch when she begged. He didn't blink when the council declared her unfit. He only said, "Better the sea than the pack," as if those words were mercy. Now, years later, Tara woke each dawn to the sound of waves and the taste of loneliness. She fished, she cooked, she stitched her own clothes from sailcloth and salt air, and always she kept gloves on her hands, even when no one was there to see, because habit is stronger than solitude. What she didn't know was that someone was coming. Far away, across dark forests and restless towns, an alpha stirred from his own heavy boredom. His name carried weight in every borderland. A man who could command storms with a glance and silence a room with a single step. Yet power had grown stale. Every mother with an ambitious daughter had pushed and preened, offering beauty like a market stall display. None of them touched the hollowness that shadowed him. Until the whisper came, a rumor of a girl with 6 fingers, cursed, they said, marked, living on the edge of the world. A spark of something unusual in a life that had grown too ordinary. It wasn't just the strangeness of her hand. Something deeper pulled at him, a low hum he felt in his chest before he even knew her name. He thought of luck. He thought of omens. He thought of the Luna he had yet to meet. And for the first time in seasons, his pulse quickened. By the next moonrise, he had made up his mind. He would find her. Tara, meanwhile, had no hint of the shift already moving toward her. She sat at her small table that evening, mending a torn net, the salt lamp glowing like a captured star. Outside, the sea darkened into ink. The night air thickened, and somewhere beyond the horizon, a boat cut through the black water, carrying a man who believed her 6th finger might just be the missing piece of his soul. Chapter 2. The Man on the Water. The night smelled of rain and restless tide. Tara stood on the small deck of her cabin, lantern light rocking in the wind. She knew this rhythm by heart, the low sigh of water against wood, the quiet hiss of brine, but something beneath the sound felt different. It was as if the ocean itself held its breath. Far out on the black horizon, a single speck of light flickered. Not a star, not a fishing boat, something else. Tara tightened the shawl around her shoulders and tried to tell herself it was nothing. A lost sailor, maybe, or the moon catching the edge of a wave. Still, her heart thudded a little too fast. She set the lantern down and pulled her gloves tighter over her hands. Behind her, the cabin door creaked with the night wind. She thought of the council's faces, of her uncle's cold eyes. Could he have sent someone after all these years? For what? To remind her she was cursed. The speck of light grew, slowly, steadily. Hours earlier, the Alpha guided his small skiff through the chop of the open sea. Salt spray clung to his dark hair and beard, but he barely noticed. Every stroke of the oars felt like it carried him closer to something his blood already recognized. The council back home would call him reckless for chasing a rumor, but their voices had long stopped holding weight. He thought of her sixth finger, of the whisper that she might be a sign. Luck, change, fate. But what stirred deepest wasn't luck. It was the way his wolf had stirred when he heard her name. Tara. The sound of it had lit a spark where boredom used to live. He pulled harder on the oars. The scent of her, faint but wild as sea air, had begun to slide through the night and into his chest. His wolf prowled beneath his skin, impatient. By the time the sky began to pale with the first light, Tara could make out the shape of the boat. One figure, tall, broad-shouldered, no fishing nets, no cargo, only purpose. She stayed on the deck as the boat eased closer, every instinct warring inside her. Run inside and lock the door. Stay and face whoever dared to find her. The sea left her no real escape. The man stood as the skiff drifted near. Even at a distance, she could feel the weight of his presence. The air around him carried something alive, something that didn't belong to ordinary men. He stepped onto the ladder of her cabin's pier with a quiet strength that made the wood groan. Up close, he looked carved from storm and midnight, eyes the color of wet stone, hair wind-tangled and damp.
You live far from everything,
he said, voice deep enough to rattle the boards beneath her feet. Tara said nothing. Words felt like dangerous things.
I'm Kael,
He added after a beat.
Alpha of Thornreach.
The title meant power, command, and danger. Her stomach tightened.
You shouldn't be here,
she managed at last, her own voice a rasp she barely recognized.
I should,
Kael said simply, eyes steady.
because you are.
The world around them seemed to still, gulls falling silent, waves softening to a whisper. The wind carried only salt and the unspoken pull between them. Inside the cabin, Kael's gaze drifted to the gloves on her hands. He did not ask. Instead, he set down the small pack he'd brought, pulling out bread and dried fruit, as though he'd always belonged at her table.
I heard a story,
He said quietly, breaking the silence.
about a girl with a sixth finger. They called it a curse.
Tara flinched. The gloves suddenly felt too tight.
They were wrong.
Kael said, his voice low but certain.
A mark is not a curse. It's a sign.
Her heart hammered. No one had ever spoken of it without disgust. No one had ever said it could mean anything but shame. He looked up, a faint light in his eyes.
Show me.
The sea outside roared in sudden applause, as if urging her on. Tara hesitated, every year of exile pressing against her ribs. But something deeper, older than fear, leaned toward him. Slowly she pulled off the glove. The extra finger glimmered in the lantern glow, a perfect, silent truth. Kael's breath caught, not in horror, but wonder.
That,
He said, stepping closer.
is the most beautiful sign I have ever seen.
The cabin seemed to draw tighter around them, warm with something she'd never known. Recognition. Outside, the tide turned, carrying the first hints of a new day. Chapter 3. The Pull of Fate. Morning rose slow and silver over the water. Mist clung to the cabin's stilts like soft smoke, while gulls called far above. Tara sat at the small wooden table, her ungloved hand resting bare between them. The sixth finger no longer felt like a secret. It pulsed warm under Kael's steady gaze, alive in a way it had never been. He had not looked away all night. Not once.
You must have questions.
She said finally, her voice hushed as if the sea might listen. Kael leaned forward, broad shoulders catching the morning light.
Only one. Why would they ever call this a curse?
His eyes swept over her hand again, slow and deliberate, like he was memorizing every curve.
It's a gift. A sign the moon favored you.
Tara's throat tightened.
They don't believe in gifts where I'm from. only rules. My uncle, he wanted the council to see me as trouble. And they did.
Kael's jaw hardened, a quiet fury flashing like a storm behind his eyes.
Your uncle.
He repeated, the word carrying weight.
He sent them after you.
She nodded once.
He said I'd bring ruin to the pack, that my blood was dangerous.
Kael reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Heat surged through her like a living current.
He lied.
He said, voice low.
What he called danger, I call destiny.
For a moment, Tara couldn't breathe. The walls of the cabin felt too close, the sea too quiet. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not as a burden to be hidden, but as something the world itself had been waiting for. Outside, Kael stepped onto the deck. The early wind tangled through his dark hair as he looked across the endless horizon. Tara followed, the rough boards cool under her bare feet.
Why did you really come?
She asked. He turned, and in the thin morning light, his eyes looked almost silver.
Because I was empty.
He said simply.
My pack is strong. My land is wide. But everything in me was restless. I kept feeling like something was missing. The moment I heard of you, it was like the world finally made sense.
The words struck deep. Tara felt them settle somewhere beneath her ribs, a place she thought had long ago turned to stone.
But I'm an exile,
She said softly.
marked. They'll never accept.
They will,
Kael cut in.
because I do. And my word is law.
The quiet force in his voice left no room for argument. Yet Tara still felt the old fear rise, the memory of jeers, the sting of being unwanted. Kael seemed to sense it. He stepped closer until she could feel the warmth of him through the sea-scented air.
Let them talk. Let them whisper. You are my Luna. My heart knew it the moment I heard your name.
Tara's breath caught. Luna, the sacred partner of an alpha, a word she had never imagined could belong to her. As the sun climbed, Kael followed her down the narrow ladder to the tide pools. The water shimmered clear as glass, tiny fish darting between rocks. Tara showed him where she gathered mussels and sea herbs, how she used a driftwood pole to draw fresh water from the deep cistern hidden under the cabin. He listened like every detail mattered. Not once did his gaze stray from her face or her hands. At midday they returned to the cabin. Tara set a small pot of soup to simmer. The scent of garlic and ocean herbs filled the room. Kael unpacked bread and smoked meat from his pack and laid them on the table. It felt startlingly natural, as if he had always belonged here. For the first time in years, Tara laughed, a quiet, surprised sound, when Kael tried to chop herbs and nearly sent a sprig flying. He grinned, slow and genuine, and the room seemed to soften around them. As evening fell, the sea darkened into violet glass. They sat side by side on the deck, legs dangling over the water. The moon lifted heavy and bright, silvering Kael's profile.
I will stay as long as you let me.
He said, his voice almost lost to the wind.
Days, weeks, forever if that's what it takes.
Tara stared at the horizon where sky melted into sea. Something inside her, something fierce and long denied, began to believe him. The tide lapped gently below, a rhythm like a heartbeat. And for the first time since exile, she no longer felt alone. Far beyond the quiet ocean, the council still whispered. Her uncle still plotted. But out here, under the endless moon, Tara felt the shape of a new life forming, slow as the tide, certain as the pull of fate. Chapter 4. Storm Signs. The next morning broke heavy and gray. Clouds hung low, thick as smoke, and the usual easy rhythm of the tide carried a different note, an edge like warning. Tara stood on the deck with a mug of sea mint tea, the warmth slipping between her palms. Beside her, Kael leaned on the rail, broad shoulders framed by the restless sky.
I know that look.
He said quietly.
The ocean's telling you something.
She nodded.
A storm's coming. Strong one. Maybe by nightfall.
He followed her gaze toward the dark seam on the horizon. The wind already tasted of iron and rain. They moved together without speaking, a quiet choreography of necessity. Tara lashed the shutters tight, while Kael secured the skiff and hauled spare rope across the deck. He worked with a calm power that filled the small space like an extra heartbeat. Every time she passed him, their shoulders brushed, the warmth of him cutting through the chill. The contact felt natural now, like something the world itself wanted. By afternoon, the first raindrops ticked against the cabin roof. The sea swelled into long, rolling hills, each one crowned with foam. Inside, Kael lit the lanterns and checked the supply shelves.
You've done this before.
He said, impressed by the neat stacks of dried fish and sealed jars.
Many times.
Tara replied, drawing the final shutter closed.
When you live alone, storms are part of the calendar.
Kael watched her a long moment, then spoke softer.
You shouldn't have had to face them alone.
The words landed deeper than she expected. For years she had worn solitude like armor. Now, for the first time, she felt how heavy it had really been. As dusk fell, the storm arrived full force. Rain slammed the cabin walls, and the sea roared like a living thing. Wind moaned through the beams, sharp and unrelenting. They sat by the hearth while the fire cracked and spat. Tara's heart pounded with the storm's rhythm, but beside her, Kael radiated steady heat. He had shed his wet coat, leaving only a dark shirt that clung to the lines of his chest.
Tell me about Thornreach,
she said, needing the distraction. He leaned back, eyes catching firelight.
It's a land of deep woods and silver rivers. Strong people, but tired. Too many years of quiet politics and old customs. They call me Alpha, but lately it has felt like a title without breath. I was restless until now.
His gaze found hers. The room seemed to shrink until there was only the sound of rain and the space between them. Tara swallowed.
You crossed an ocean for a rumor.
No,
Kael said, voice low.
I crossed an ocean for what my soul already knew.
The storm deepened, rain drumming so loud it was like the sea itself had climbed to the roof. The cabin shivered under a mighty gust. Tara startled, and Kael's hand found hers, warm, certain.
You're safe.
He said, the words a quiet oath. Something inside her unlatched. She let her head rest against his shoulder, the scent of salt and cedar surrounding her. Hours passed like a single breath. When the worst of the storm finally eased toward midnight, Kael shifted just enough to look down at her.
When this ends,
He murmured.
I'll ask you to leave this cabin with me, but only if you want to.
Tara closed her eyes. For years, she had imagined freedom as a lonely horizon. Now it looked like something else entirely. A life tethered not by exile, but by choice. By morning, the storm had rolled out to sea. The air smelled scrubbed and new. Sunlight spilled across the deck, catching in the wet wood like molten glass. Tara stepped outside, the sixth finger of her right hand glowing faintly in the bright light. Kael followed, setting a gentle palm on the small of her back.
Your world waits,
He said. She turned to him, hair damp from the mist, and for the first time in years the thought of home didn't taste like fear. The ocean no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a door. But beyond that glittering horizon, trouble brewed. Her uncle had heard whispers of a boat that left the mainland under moonlight. The council, uneasy with their own decree, began to wonder if their exile had created something stronger than they intended. And as Tara stood with Kael beneath the washed clean sky, a quiet certainty settled in her chest. The life they were about to claim would not go unchallenged. Still, she didn't flinch. The storm inside her had already broken. Chapter 5. Coffee and Confessions. Morning returned softer than she expected. Sea glass skies, a hush after the storm's roar. Tara brewed coffee from the beans she saved for rare occasions, the scent rich and smoky inside the small cabin. She poured 2 cups and set them on the table, the steam rising in gentle spirals. Kael was already awake, standing at the window where sunlight spilled across his shoulders. He turned when she spoke his name, a quiet gratitude flickering through his eyes.
Coffee,
She said, a faint smile tugging at her lips.
a peace offering after the storm.
He accepted the cup with a low chuckle.
Peace.
He echoed.
I could use it.
They sat across from each other, the cabin holding the silence like it was part of the conversation. Outside, the ocean stretched calm and endless, a sheet of silver breathing against the stilts. Kael took a long sip, then set the cup down.
I haven't told you everything.
He began, voice deep but unhurried.
About why I came.
Tara wrapped both hands around her own mug, waiting.
For years,
He continued.
the pack treated me like a prize to be paraded. Every mother with an ambitious daughter pushed and schemed, like my life was a market where they could sell beauty and bloodlines.
His jaw tightened.
They came with smiles and sweet words, pretending it was about love, but I could smell the hunger behind it. They were thirsty, desperate for status.
His gaze dropped to his coffee, fingers tracing the rim of the cup.
It wore me down. Each gathering felt like a theater where everyone wanted something, my name, my territory, a claim to power. They'd line up their daughters at feasts, eyes bright with calculation. No one looked at me as a man, only as an alpha to conquer.
Tara's chest tightened.
That sounds lonely.
It was.
He looked up then, the quiet in his eyes deeper than the sea beyond the windows.
I grew tired of the empty smiles, the constant offers. The council kept saying it was time to choose a mate, but every choice felt like a cage. I started to wonder if I was broken, if I'd ever feel something real.
He paused, letting the words settle between them.
Then I heard about you.
The room seemed to lean closer. The fire cracked softly in the hearth.
It wasn't just the story of the 6th finger.
Kael said, his voice lower now, almost reverent.
It was the way the rumor felt. A girl cast out for something she never asked for, living on the edge of the world. Different, untamed. My wolf reacted before I could even think. I felt dash.
He broke off, searching for the right shape of the truth.
Like a missing piece had just introduced itself.
Tara stared into her coffee, heart pounding.
And you thought, what? That I might fix the emptiness?
No.
He shook his head slowly.
That you might understand it.
The simplicity of the answer caught her off guard. No grand promises, no royal speeches, just a man who had grown tired of performance, seeking someone whose soul might meet his in silence. She leaned back, studying him.
So you crossed the ocean because you were tired of being wanted for all the wrong reasons.
Kael gave a faint, rueful smile.
Exactly. I wanted someone who wasn't reaching for a title. Someone real. I didn't even know if you'd open the door.
And yet you came?
She said softly.
And yet I came.
He repeated.
Because the moment I heard your name, I wasn't tired anymore.
Tara felt the words settle into her like sunlight after rain. Years of exile had left her wary of every kindness, but Kael's voice carried no angle, no scheme, just certainty. They lingered over the cooling coffee, letting the quiet speak when words weren't needed. Through the window, the sea shimmered with a slow, steady promise. At last, Kael reached across the table, his hand covering hers with a warmth that felt like home.
This,
He said, nodding toward their joined hands and the small, sea-salted room around them.
is the first thing in a long time that feels right.
Tara exhaled, a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The storm outside had passed, but something far larger was unfolding. A change not born of exile or loneliness, but of choice. And as they sat together in the gentle light of a new morning, the future no longer felt like something to fear. It felt like something they could build, one slow and steady heartbeat at a time. Chapter 6, Ripples of the Past. The day eased into a gentle gray. The ocean lay still, the kind of calm that arrives after a hard storm. Tara and Kael moved easily around the cabin, cooking, mending, the quiet rhythm of two people learning each other's space. Outside, gulls wheeled over the silver water. Inside, the air carried the warm scent of coffee and driftwood smoke. But the calm could not silence memory. Kael sat at the small table, sharpening a fishing knife on a whetstone. The rasp of steel filled the room like a slow heartbeat. Tara watched from the hearth, her sixth finger resting unconsciously on the rim of a clay cup.
You keep drifting.
She said softly. He looked up.
Do I?
You're far away.
She murmured.
Back with your pack.
Kael exhaled.
I keep seeing their faces, the council, the mothers. All those endless dinners where they paraded daughters in jeweled dresses. Every night the same performance. They called it tradition. I called it exhaustion.
He set the knife down, rubbing a hand across his jaw.
I grew tired of how predictable it became. Smile, nod, listen to stories meant to impress me. They thought beauty alone could hold my attention, but each night ended the same, silence inside me. Nothing stirred.
Tara shifted closer, her chair scraping gently across the wood.
That must have felt like a cage.
It did.
He admitted.
Worse, it felt like I was losing myself. I kept asking why I felt so restless. I started to dread every celebration. The music, the gifts, the daughters standing like trophies, it all blurred together. I'd leave the hall and walk the forest just to breathe.
He stared at his hands, the memory of those long walks flickering in his eyes.
I thought maybe I wasn't meant for a mate. Maybe the moon had forgotten me.
Tara reached out, placing her hand over his.
But it hadn't.
She said quietly. Kael looked up, a slow warmth rising in his gaze.
No, it was waiting. You were waiting.
The room stilled. Outside, a wave lapped against the stilts with a soft, steady hush.
I need you to understand something,
He continued.
When I heard about you, it wasn't just curiosity. It was a pull so strong it felt older than me, like my blood recognized you before my mind did. Every story about you, the cabin, the exile, the sixth finger, lit something in me I thought had died.
He drew a breath, voice roughened by memory.
The mothers back home wanted me to choose quick and clean. But real choice is never clean. It's messy, wild. That's what you are to me. Wild truth.
Tara's chest tightened. For years she had lived as a rumor, a shadow. To be called truth felt like a blessing. They sat in the quiet for a long moment, the crackle of the fire and the faint thrum of the sea weaving around their words. Then Kael's expression darkened slightly.
There is one more thing,
He said.
Your uncle. I can't let what he did stand. Exile is more than cruelty, it's betrayal. He poisoned the council against you because he wanted control. I can smell it even from here.
Tara's breath caught.
He'll never let you take me back.
Kael's eyes hardened to steel.
He doesn't have to let me. My choice is final, but he will answer for the harm he caused.
A shiver passed through her, not of fear, but of something like long-delayed justice. Later, they stepped outside with mugs of warm tea. The horizon stretched endless and pale, the sun a soft coin above the sea. Kael drew her close beneath the open sky.
When I came here,
He said, his voice low.
I thought I was just tired. But now I see it wasn't weariness. It was waiting. All those empty nights were leading to this.
Tara rested her head against his chest. the steady beat of his heart echoing through her. The world that once condemned her now felt very far away.
We'll face them.
He promised, his breath warm against her hair.
Together.
She closed her eyes, letting the words settle like sunlight. The ocean whispered at their feet, carrying the sound outward, past the cabin, past the horizon, as if sealing a vow. And somewhere beyond that horizon, in a council hall that still believed it held power, an uncle felt the first tremor of a reckoning he could no longer control. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Tide. By mid-afternoon, the sky sharpened to a clear blue glass, the kind that hides tension beneath its beauty. Tara stood at the deck's edge, hair lifted by a soft wind, while Kael tightened the lines on the skiff with quiet precision. The air carried that subtle metallic taste she had learned to trust, the promise of change, not weather this time, but something human, heavier. He glanced up, catching her gaze.
They know,
he said, his voice low and sure. Tara's sixth finger curled against her palm.
The council?
And your uncle.
Kael answered.
Word travels faster than the tide. The night I left Thornreach, they would have questioned every boatman, every trader. By now, they'll have pieced together where I've gone.
The thought landed like a cold stone. For years, Tara had been invisible. Now the world that cast her out was staring straight back. Kael joined her at the railing.
They'll come,
he said.
Your uncle will dress it up as concern. The council will call it a matter of law. But make no mistake, they'll come to reclaim what they think they own.
The words tightened something inside her chest.
And you? What will you do?
He turned fully to face her, his presence filling the small deck like a tide rising to the beams.
I will stand between them and you. That's not bravado. It's a promise. You are my Luna. I won't let them decide your life again.
The conviction in his voice left no space for argument. Still, Tara's old fears stirred.
I don't want blood on these waters,
she said softly. Kael's expression softened but never wavered.
Nor do I. But I won't let fear dictate our future. The council thrives on fear. Your uncle feeds on it. We will give them none.
They went inside as the sun began to lower, the cabin glowing with a late light. Tara poured fresh coffee, the rich scent weaving through the room like quiet courage. Kael sat across from her, forearms resting on the table, eyes steady.
You've told me what they did,
he said.
But tell me what they never saw. Who were you before exile tried to name you?
The question startled her. For so long, her story had been defined by what was taken, not what remained.
I was curious,
she said after a long pause.
I loved maps. I used to draw the coastlines from memory. I wanted to build a garden that could feed the whole pack, but every idea I had they called impossible. Too bold, too strange. And when the sixth finger appeared, it was easier for them to exile me than to see me.
Kael's hands tightened around his cup.
They feared your mind as much as your hand.
Tara met his gaze.
Maybe, but they never broke either.
Something in his eyes deepened, a quiet awe.
That strength is exactly what they can't control, and exactly what I need beside me.
The conversation spilled into the evening. Kael spoke of the endless banquets back home, how mothers arranged their daughters like polished gems, how every smile hid a contract.
They were thirsty for position,
he said, voice edged with weary memory.
Not one of them looked past the alpha to the man. I felt like a prize animal at auction. My wolf recoiled every time.
Tara listened, the words sinking like stones in a still pool.
Each night I left those halls emptier.
Kael went on.
I would walk the forest until dawn, trying to remember what real air smelled like. I kept thinking, if this is what the moon planned, why does it feel like a slow death?
He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over the sixth finger with a reverence that made her breath catch.
Now I know why. Because my path wasn't there, it was here.
The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, like a tide about to rise. Later, when darkness settled and stars hung low over the water, Kael stood on the deck, his profile cut in silver light. Tara joined him, the sea whispering beneath their feet.
They'll come soon,
He said, eyes on the far horizon.
but we won't wait for them to decide our fate. Tomorrow we sail for Thornreach, not to beg, but to claim what's ours.
The word ours wrapped around her like a shield. Tara placed her hand over his heart, feeling the steady beat that matched the ocean's slow pulse.
Then tomorrow,
She whispered.
we face them together.
Kael bent and pressed his forehead to hers, a quiet vow sealed in salt air and moonlight. Far beyond the cabin, the council plotted, and an uncle sharpened old grudges. But here, on this isolated edge of the world, a different kind of storm was gathering, one of resolve, fierce and unstoppable. Chapter 8. The Life She Built Alone. Morning opened soft and gold, sunlight slipping across the waves like liquid honey. Tara woke before Kael, as she always did. Habit, she thought, but also survival. Years of exile had taught her to greet the day first, before hunger, before storms, before memory. She wrapped a wool shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the deck. The sea was calm, a blue so deep it looked like it could swallow secrets. Below, the tide revealed the rocky shallows that had been her pantry, her larder, and her quiet classroom in the art of staying alive. When the council abandoned her on this isolated cabin, built on stilts over the ocean, they had expected her to wither. Instead, she adapted. On the north side of the cabin, she had carved out a garden from nothing but driftwood crates and sand-enriched soil. She hauled buckets of seawater each day and distilled them through sun-baked clay pots she built herself, producing just enough fresh water to feed small beds of hardy greens, sea kale, salt-tolerant spinach, and herbs that could survive brine. She traded with no one. Everything that grew there came from seeds she had saved in secret when the council dragged her away. Every sprout felt like defiance. Below the deck, she set traps for crabs and nets for fish, weighted with stones she shaped into hooks. She learned to read the tides like a clock, when the schools of silver herring gathered, when the moon coaxed clams to the surface. Behind the cabin, where jagged rocks hid a natural hollow, she built a smokehouse from driftwood and iron scraps. There she smoked fish and mussels, sealing them in jars of oil she pressed from sea plants. Salt was never scarce. The ocean itself gave it freely. What others would call scraps, she turned into meals that lasted weeks. Her greatest invention lay beneath the cabin itself, a cistern carved into the bedrock, lined with charcoal and sand. Rainwater funneled down from the roof, filtered through layers she cleaned each moon. In the hardest winters, when storms left her stranded for days, that cistern saved her. She had no books, no teachers, just memory, instinct, and a will to outlast the loneliness. By the time Kael woke and stepped onto the deck, Tara was already knee-deep in the shallows, gathering seaweed and checking traps. He watched from the railing, quiet admiration settling in his eyes.
You've built a whole world here.
He said as she climbed the ladder with the basket of clams. Tara shrugged lightly.
I had to. No one was coming with help. If I wanted to live, I had to listen to what the sea would teach me.
He took the basket from her, his large hands brushing hers.
They called you cursed.
He said softly.
But what you've done is more powerful than any blessing they ever gave.
Inside, over morning tea, Kael pressed for details.
How did you even begin? When they left you here, how did you not give up?
Tara stared into the steam rising from her cup.
The first nights were the worst. I cried until my throat bled, but hunger is louder than grief. I started small, learning to catch minnows, drying kelp on the railing. Every success, no matter how tiny, was a reason to wake up the next day. I told myself, survive today and you win.
Kael's gaze never wavered.
And you did. Every single day.
She gave a faint, almost shy smile.
Every single day.
Kael reached across the table, his thumb tracing the soft skin near her sixth finger.
What they called a curse kept you alive.
He said.
That extra strength, that different way of thinking. They couldn't see it, but I do.
The room held the words like a vow. Tara felt the truth of them deep in her bones. That afternoon, they worked side by side, cleaning nets, packing jars of smoked fish, harvesting herbs from the driftwood garden. Kael listened as she explained how the sea current shifted with the moon and how to read the color of the sky for hidden storms. He watched her move with effortless certainty, and something in him settled. This was not a woman who needed rescue. This was a woman who had already conquered exile and carved life out of salt and rock. When dusk finally wrapped the cabin in violet light, Kael drew her close, the scent of sea and smoke between them.
You are the strongest soul I've ever known,
He said against her hair.
You didn't just survive, you built a kingdom out of the ocean.
Tara rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat that now matched the tide. For the first time, the life she'd built in isolation didn't feel like a lonely fortress. With Kael beside her, it felt like the beginning of something vast and unbreakable. Chapter 9, The Journey Back. The horizon blushed, rose and gold as dawn unfolded. Tara stood on the deck, the sea calm beneath her feet. She breathed in the salted air and felt the weight of every year she had survived here. Years of quiet victories, of fishing in freezing winds, of turning loneliness into a skill. Now the cabin that once kept her alive would soon become memory. Behind her, Kael emerged, his dark hair damp from washing at the rain barrel. He carried a small leather satchel, already packed. His eyes, silvered by morning light, found hers and softened.
Today we sail,
He said. Tara traced the railing with her fingertips.
It doesn't feel real. I've never left this place since the night they left me here.
You were forced to stay.
Kael replied, stepping close.
Now you choose to leave.
They shared a last breakfast of smoked herring and garden greens. Kael insisted on helping with every motion, stowing the jars of dried herbs, folding the blankets she had hand-stitched through endless winters. His movements were careful, almost reverent, as though he understood that each object carried the story of her survival.
I keep thinking,
He said as he tightened the rope on a crate of provisions.
about how strong you had to be. Not just to live here, but to stay whole. My life was full of noise, crowded halls, endless demands, but I was empty. You were silent, yet full.
Tara looked up from the basket she was tying.
You weren't empty. You were waiting. The difference is everything.
He let the words settle, then reached out and brushed his thumb over her sixth finger.
And waiting led me here.
By midday, the skiff bobbed gently against the pier. Tara's belongings, carefully chosen essentials, smoked fish, seeds from her salt garden, were secured in waterproof bundles. She paused at the cabin door, taking in the space one final time. The driftwood shelves, the handmade table, the faint scent of cedar smoke. Every board told a story of nights when she refused to break. Kael sensed her hesitation and stood behind her, warm and steady.
This place saved you,
He said softly.
but it doesn't own you.
Tara closed the door and slipped the key, carved from whalebone, into her pocket.
Then let's go.
They set out under a sky brushed with thin clouds. Kael rowed with strong, even strokes, while Tara kept watch on the horizon. Gulls followed for a time, then veered away, leaving only the sound of oars and the steady surge of water. Hours passed in companionable silence before Kael spoke again.
I need you to know what waits on the other side.
He said,
The council won't welcome us with open arms. They'll try to shame us, maybe even challenge my right to lead.
Tara's voice was calm.
And your uncle?
A muscle ticked in Kael's jaw.
He'll come with accusations. He'll say you bewitched me or call you a threat to the bloodline, but I am Alpha. Their rules cannot cage what the moon has chosen.
Tara studied his face. The strength there carved by more than power,
You've prepared for this moment longer than you think.
she said.
Every feast you walked away from, every daughter you refused, that was training for today.
His eyes flicked toward her, bright with quiet recognition.
You're right. I wasn't rejecting them out of bitterness. I was saving the space for you.
The sea stretched endless and blue around them, carrying the truth of his words like a silent witness. As dusk approached, Kael guided the skiff toward a hidden cove he knew from maps and scouting missions. They would camp here overnight before the final leg to Thornreach. The cove smelled of pine and brine, its sand soft and untouched. They built a small fire and roasted fish caught along the way. The flames danced against the rocks, throwing shadows that moved like restless spirits.
Tomorrow,
Kael said, watching the sparks climb the night.
everything changes. The council will see us together. They'll see your strength, and they will know that their exile only made you greater.
Tara stared into the fire, the sixth finger of her right hand glowing faintly in the emberlight.
I used to believe the council defined me.
She said.
Now I know I defined myself. Whatever happens tomorrow, they can't take that.
Kael reached over and drew her close, his arm a quiet shield.
Whatever storm waits on land, we meet it side by side.
The tide hummed beyond the cove, steady and eternal. Tara rested her head on Kael's shoulder, feeling the truth of his heartbeat against her cheek. For the first time since the night of her exile, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a horizon, wide, bright, and theirs to claim. Chapter 10. Return to Thornreach. The following morning broke with a sky of pale silver and a breeze that smelled of pine and distant earth. Tara woke to the rhythm of waves slipping against the skiff and the low crackle of dying embers from the night's fire. For years, she had known only the endless horizon of water. Now, for the first time in seasons, land waited ahead. Kael stood at the edge of the cove, arms folded, studying the faint outline of Thornreach's cliffs. Even from here, the mainland looked sharp and certain, its jagged gray rising from green. When Tara joined him, he slid an arm around her waist and spoke in a quiet tone meant only for her.
This is it. By sundown, they'll know we've come home.
She pressed closer, feeling the steady thrum of his heart.
Do you ever doubt this?
She asked.
Bringing me back? Facing them.
Kael shook his head, the morning light catching in his dark hair.
No, I doubted everything else, but not this.
They launched the skiff as the sun lifted, a glowing coin behind a veil of mist. The crossing was long but calm. Tara kept her eyes on the shifting line of the coast, each mile bringing sharper detail. Trees bent by sea wind, white gulls wheeling, the faint black dots of watchtowers she remembered only from stories. As the cliffs grew near, Kael began to speak again, his voice steady but low.
I've thought a lot about what I'll say.
He admitted.
To the council. To your uncle. I'll tell them the truth, that their exile tried to break you and instead forged something stronger. That my heart and my wolf chose you the moment I heard your name. That no decree can undo what the moon has already bound.
Tara listened, the words sinking like stones into still water.
And if they challenge you?
Kael's jaw tightened, but there was no hesitation.
Then they challenge the Alpha, and they will lose.
By mid-afternoon, the skiff glided into a narrow inlet that opened toward the Thornreach harbor. Smoke rose from distant chimneys, carrying the scent of wood and salt. Villagers paused on the wharf as they approached, eyes drawn to the tall figure at the oars, and the woman beside him whose gloves could not hide a sixth finger gleaming faintly in the sun. Kael tied the skiff with a sailor's ease and extended his hand to Tara.
Ready?
She stepped onto the dock, her boots meeting solid land for the first time in years. The ground felt strange beneath her, too firm after seasons of rocking tides, yet she stood steady. A low murmur swept through the onlookers. Faces she didn't recognize tilted toward whispers of the cursed girl, the Alpha's choice, the one they exiled. Kael met their stares head on, the power in his gaze scattering silence across the harbor.
Tell the council.
He commanded the nearest guard.
The Alpha has returned, and he brings his Luna.
The council hall stood at the heart of Thornreach, a great stone circle that smelled of cedar and old smoke. Its heavy doors opened with a groan as Kael led Tara inside. 12 elders sat in a half moon, their robes deep green, eyes sharp with judgment. At their center, her uncle waited, his face as cold and polished as the day he betrayed her.
Tara,
The council leader said, voice clipped.
you defy an exile sentence.
Before Tara could speak, Kael stepped forward, the weight of his alpha presence filling the hall.
She defies nothing. I overrule the sentence. She is my chosen Luna.
A ripple of shock moved through the elders. Her uncle rose, anger flashing.
This woman is cursed. Her deformity is a mark of ill fortune. You endanger Thornreach by bringing her here.
Kael's silver eyes hardened to steel.
Her so-called deformity kept her alive where you hoped she'd die. She turned exile into mastery. While you plotted, she built a life from salt and wind. That is not a curse. That is strength.
The hall fell silent. Even the council leader looked momentarily disarmed. Tara stepped forward then, her voice steady.
You left me to starve. You called me dangerous for being born different. But I survived every storm you prayed would finish me. And I am done living as a rumor.
Her uncle's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Kael's voice filled the silence.
I claim her as Luna. Any who oppose this challenges me as Alpha.
For a long heartbeat, no one moved. Then the council leader lowered his head.
The moon favors the brave.
He said at last.
The council will not challenge the Alpha's claim.
A low murmur of assent swept the room. Outside, the late sun spilled gold across the village square. Children peered from doorways, their curiosity free of the judgment that had once condemned her. Kael turned to Tara, his hand finding hers.
It's done.
He said quietly. She looked back toward the sea, the horizon where her cabin lay hidden like a chapter in a book she had written alone.
It's only beginning.
She replied. Kael smiled, the weariness of years finally lifting.
Then let's begin together.
He drew her close, the scent of cedar and salt mixing in the cool evening air. Around them, Thornreach hummed with new whispers, not of curses, but of change. And above, the moon rose early, silver and full, as if to bless the union that neither exile nor fear could break. Chapter 11. A Home Chosen. The moon hung low and bright over Thornreach, washing the cobblestone streets in a quiet silver. Tara stood on the balcony of Kael's great hall, the scent of cedar smoke and distant sea drifting through the night. Below her, the village lay hushed, its torches flickering like patient stars. For the first time in years, she felt the ground beneath her feet as something more than a memory. This was home, not the prison they once promised it would be. Kael joined her, his presence filling the cool air with warmth. He rested a hand on the small of her back and looked out over the rooftops.
They are still whispering,
He said, his voice carrying a low strength.
but not like before.
Tara leaned into him.
I can hear it.
She said,
Not fear. Curiosity.
He smiled faintly.
They are learning a new story. One we wrote.
The council had fallen silent after their last meeting. Her uncle, so quick to spit accusations, had left the hall with eyes dark and unreadable. But he hadn't disappeared. Kael knew the man was too proud, too invested in the old power to fade quietly.
We should speak of him.
Kael said, his tone sharpening.
Your uncle will try to weave his influence again. Perhaps not openly, but in shadows.
Tara's gaze wandered toward the harbor where moonlight silvered the water.
He's built on shadows his whole life. But shadows can't root where light keeps growing.
She touched the sixth finger of her right hand, letting it rest against the cold iron railing.
For years, I thought this made me weak. Now I know it's what saved me, and it's what makes me unafraid of him.
Kael turned to her fully, his eyes bright as if reflecting the moon.
Your strength is beyond what they've ever known, and that terrifies him.
The next morning brought a quiet bustle as villagers carried on their lives. Kael and Tara walked through the market, every stall alive with scent and color. Smoked fish, fresh herbs, fabrics dyed in deep forest greens. People paused to greet them. Some bowed lightly to Kael. Others, more shy, simply offered soft smiles to Tara. An older woman reached across her stall of woven baskets and gently touched Tara's gloved hand.
Welcome home,
She said, her voice rough with sincerity.
We were told so many lies.
Tara's breath caught.
Thank you.
She managed. Kael met the woman's eyes, his own steady and warm.
The lies end now.
Back in the hall, over steaming cups of morning coffee, they planned what came next. Kael spoke of expanding the council to include new voices, healers, builders, even young scouts who understood the land better than any elder.
We need people who know how to adapt, not just recite old laws.
He said.
Your mind, your vision, they're exactly what Thornreach needs.
Tara thought of her salt-tolerant garden, of the ways she had coaxed life from brine and stone.
I can teach them to grow food that lasts through storms,
She said.
not just here, but for villages across the coast.
Kael's smile carried quiet pride.
This is what I hoped for. Not only to bring you home, but to make the home worthy of you.
Days turned into a gentle rhythm. Tara drew maps of coastal wind patterns and soil tides, teaching apprentices how to read the sky the way she once read her isolation. Children followed her to the edge of the sea to learn how to harvest kelp and dry fish with nothing but sunlight and salt. Kael oversaw council reforms, cutting away the old, rigid laws that had condemned her. The whispers that once hissed, cursed, slowly softened into remarkable. At night, when the village slept, Tara and Kael would walk the cliffs, their hands linked, the sixth finger fitting against his palm as if it had always belonged there. They spoke of the future, new trade routes, gardens that could feed hundreds, a council that no longer feared the unusual. Weeks later, a quiet summons arrived. Her uncle requested an audience. Kael and Tara met him in the council chamber, the air thick with cedar and unspoken tension. The man looked older now, his power dimmed, though his eyes still carried the cold glint of ambition.
You've changed the council.
He said, his voice stripped of ceremony.
The people follow you. I can't undo that.
Tara stood straight, the strength of her years in exile steadying her.
You taught me one thing,
She replied.
how to live without approval. I don't need yours now.
The silence that followed felt final. Her uncle bowed, reluctant, almost bitter, and left. His footsteps faded into the stone hall and were gone. That night, Kael and Tara returned to the balcony. The moon rose high and full, casting a path of silver across the sea. Kael wrapped his arms around her from behind, his breath warm against her ear.
You turned exile into strength,
he whispered.
and strength into home.
Tara closed her eyes, letting the words settle. The cabin on the ocean had been survival. This, standing here with him, a life chosen and shared, was living. The moonlit sea stretched toward the horizon like a promise fulfilled. And for the first time, the world she once feared felt not only safe, but infinite. Chapter 12. A Legacy Written in Moonlight. Late spring settled over Thornreach with a quiet kind of wonder. The village, once wary and sharp with gossip, now pulsed with easy warmth. Children raced through sun-dappled alleys. Traders from distant harbors arrived to barter for the salt garden seeds Tara had perfected in exile. Everywhere, there were traces of her life woven into the new rhythm. Fishing nets hung with sea kale stalks, barrels of rainwater lined with her charcoal filters, gardens planted with her careful maps of tide and soil. Kael watched it all with a private pride. Each sunrise reminded him of the years he'd endured empty banquets and hollow introductions, of the endless parade of mothers with their daughters dressed like trophies, all vying for an alpha's name. He remembered the stale scent of oversweet perfumes and the sly calculations behind every smile. How many times had he left those great halls before the last toast, walking alone through moonlit forests just to hear his own thoughts? Those memories no longer stung. They felt like discarded husks. The true life he'd been waiting for had been hidden out on the water, in the quiet strength of the woman beside him. A new council and a new way. Weeks of reform reshaped Thornreach. Kael, with Tara at his side, opened council seats to healers, builders, and foragers, voices once dismissed as too common. Old laws about purity and birthright were rewritten. Where the elders once saw danger and difference, they now saw a future. Tara's salt-resistant gardens became a blueprint for every coastal pack. Her design for deep cisterns spread inland, ending the long thirst of dry-season villages. For the first time in generations, no child in Thornreach went hungry. When Kael introduced these changes, he always gave her name first.
This was Tara's idea.
He'd say, and every time the room quieted with respect. The girl once exiled as cursed now defined the pack's survival. Her uncle tried one final time to rattle that new order. He arrived unannounced at the council chamber, his eyes carrying the same cold gleam of the night he betrayed her. He spoke of tradition, of caution, of bloodlines that must remain untouched. Kael listened only long enough to let the man feel heard. Then, in a voice that filled the stone hall like thunder, he ended it.
The moon has spoken through resilience and wisdom.
Kael said.
If you wish to serve Thornreach, you may. But if you cling to the old fear, you will find no place here.
The uncle's reply came as silence. He turned and left, his power dissolving with every step. The door's slow close felt like the final breath of an old world. By early summer, the great hall smelled of blooming sea roses and drying herbs. Tara and Kael spent evenings on the balcony, sipping strong coffee as the ocean whispered below. Sometimes they spoke of the years behind them, his long nights of restless duty, her quiet victories against hunger and isolation. Sometimes they simply watched the moon climb and said nothing at all. One evening, as twilight washed the village in soft lavender, Kael pressed a small carved seal into her palm, a symbol of shared rule.
This isn't a gift,
He said.
It's recognition. Everything I am as Alpha is stronger with you beside me.
Tara traced the emblem with her sixth finger, the one the council once called a curse. It felt like a circle closing and a door opening all at once. Before the next full moon, they returned together to the cabin in the ocean. The little house still smelled of salt and cedar. Nets hung in their places. Her garden of driftwood crates had burst into quiet green. Tara moved through the rooms like greeting an old friend.
This place kept me alive.
She whispered.
It taught me everything I know about patience and strength.
Kael wrapped his arms around her from behind.
It brought you to me.
They left the cabin carefully locked but not abandoned. It would remain what it had always been, a testament to survival, a sanctuary for the next soul who might need its strength. As another full moon climbed over Thornreach, Kael and Tara stood together on the high cliffs. Below them, the village glittered with lantern light, and the sea rolled silver to the horizon. The council's new voices were planning next season's trade routes. Children were planting salt gardens in soil once thought barren. Kael drew her close.
I used to think leadership meant endless feasts and alliances.
He said.
Now I know it means building something that lasts beyond us.
Tara rested her head on his chest. Her sixth finger curled against his heart.
And it began the day you listened to a rumor and crossed the ocean.
They stood in silence, letting the sound of waves seal the truth. From exile to influence, from whispered curse to living legend, Tara had turned every slight into strength. Beside her, Kael had turned restless power into purpose. Under the endless moonlight of Thornreach, they had not only found each other, they had built a world where difference was destiny, and love was the truest law. Chapter 13. The Long, Bright Future. Late summer warmed Thornreach until the air tasted of sun-baked pine and salt. The days stretched slow and golden, each one a quiet proof that the life Tara and Kael had chosen was holding fast. Where once the market square buzzed with suspicion, now it hummed with laughter and trade. Salt garden greens and smoked fish, descendants of Tara's lonely experiments, had become staples on every table. Children darted through the lanes, carrying baskets of kelp and herbs, their shouts echoing off the old stone walls. From the balcony of the great hall, Tara could see it all, a village transformed by courage and patient work. What had begun as exile now shaped an entire coast. Beside her, Kael rested one broad hand over hers, the sixth finger fitting perfectly beneath his palm, as if the moon itself had drawn the match. The council, once rigid and suspicious, now met beneath open skies. Healers shared knowledge with farmers, builders traded ideas with sailors. Tara sat at the long round table, her maps of tide and soil spread like living blueprints. She explained how moon cycles could predict rich harvests, how simple smokehouses could feed families through harsh winters. Her voice, once silenced by decree, now carried across the assembly like a lighthouse beam. Every time she spoke, Kael listened with the same quiet awe he had felt on the night he first crossed the ocean to find her. Outside those meetings, Tara taught apprentices to read the sky, to build cisterns deep enough to outlast any drought. Women who once feared their own difference brought daughters to learn from her. The word cursed had faded to legend, replaced by wise and founder. But Tara's mind still reached outward. She began sending seed bundles and hand-drawn guides to distant packs along the coast. Some traveled days by ship to learn her methods firsthand. Letters arrived sealed with wax and gratitude, proof that the life she had built in exile now nourished strangers she would never meet. Kael encouraged every step.
The sea carried you to survival.
He told her one evening as they walked the moonlit cliffs.
Now it carries your wisdom everywhere.
He spoke of new trade routes, of alliances that honored the land instead of exploiting it. Together they planned voyages that would spread her techniques to far harbors, making sure no pack would face hunger as she once had. Her uncle never regained his former influence. Occasionally Tara glimpsed him at a distance. Older now, shoulders bent, his voice no longer the weapon it once was. When they passed in the market, he lowered his eyes. No apology ever came, but none was needed. The power he had used to exile her had simply dissolved, like salt in rain. One late afternoon, he approached her quietly near the harbor.
I can't change what I did,
He said, eyes fixed on the ground.
but I see now that I was wrong.
Tara studied him for a long moment, then answered with calm clarity.
I built a life despite you. That is enough.
He nodded once and walked away. The tide washed the moment clean. Seasons turned. The salt gardens grew into forests of edible green. Thornreach's children no longer knew the word famine. Festivals replaced the old matchmaking feasts. Music and moonlit dances celebrated harvests and ocean voyages instead of bloodlines. Kael ruled with quiet certainty, never once allowing old laws of fear to return. When disputes arose, Tara's measured voice often settled them before swords or tempers could rise. The pack began to speak of the years of balance, an age when difference became strength. At night, Kael and Tara still climbed the cliffs to watch the moon pour silver across the sea. Sometimes they brought mugs of coffee, brewed strong and dark, and sat in silence until dawn painted the horizon.
This is what I dreamed of when I crossed to find you.
Kael said one such night, his arm around her shoulders.
Not just love. A future built on it.
Tara leaned into him, feeling the steady heartbeat that had once rode across endless water just to find her.
And it started,
She whispered.
because neither of us gave up. Me on survival, you on hope.
Years later, travelers arriving in Thornreach would hear the story of the woman once exiled for a sixth finger and the alpha who crossed an ocean because every other life felt hollow. They would see her gardens, taste her salt-harvested herbs, and walk streets where no child went hungry. Some would call it legend, others miracle. But those who knew Tara and Kael understood it as something simpler and truer. A life chosen with courage, lived with steadfast love. On clear nights when the moon rose full and bright, casting a silver path over the endless water, Tara and Kael stood together on the balcony or the cliff's edge, hands intertwined. The world below whispered with waves and laughter, carrying their legacy into the horizon. Their story, born of exile and quiet strength, deepened by love and sealed by the moon, had become the heartbeat of Thornreach itself, a promise to every soul that difference could be destiny and that love, once found, could remake the world. Chapter 14, Moonlit Ever After. Autumn drifted in soft and amber, the sea calm as glass and the air scented with cedar and slow-burning hearths. Thornreach had settled into a rhythm that felt unshakable. Gardens thriving along the coast, children laughing in markets that once whispered curses, elders meeting under open skies to build, rather than to banish. From the highest cliff, Tara and Kael could see every sign of the life they had forged. What began as survival on a lonely cabin above the ocean had become a living legacy. The people who once feared her sixth finger now looked for her guidance. The council that once condemned her now quoted her words as law. Standing there, the moon bright on the waves, Tara breathed deeply of a world she had helped to remake. They visited the ocean cabin one final time before winter's first frost. Inside, the air still carried the faint salt and cedar scent of her long solitude. Nets hung neatly. The driftwood garden boxes overflowed with green. Every board and beam seemed to remember the years when she lived on courage alone. Kael walked the small rooms in quiet wonder.
This is where you built your strength.
He said.
Every day you chose life when others had written your ending.
Tara ran her fingers across the table she had sanded smooth with her own hands.
I came here as someone the world wanted to forget.
She said softly.
Now this place feels like a monument, not to exile, but to possibility.
They left the cabin undisturbed. A sanctuary. A silent witness to all that courage could grow. Life in Thornreach unfolded into long, luminous years. Tara's salt garden techniques spread across distant packs, feeding thousands. Kael's reformed council became a model of shared leadership, blending wisdom of healers, sailors, and builders. Where once there had been suspicion of difference, there now stood curiosity and celebration. Children born under the silver moon carried stories of a Luna whose sixth finger had shaped their survival. To them, Tara was not a legend of fear, but a living truth that strength often comes in forms the world first calls strange. Each season deepened the bond between Tara and Kael. They ruled not through force, but through a quiet, unbreakable steadiness. Evenings were spent on the great hall's balcony, sipping strong coffee while moonlight threaded through their joined hands. Sometimes they spoke of the first day they met. Sometimes they simply listened to the tide. On the anniversary of their union, Kael led Tara once more to the high cliff where he had first promised that no council could cage the moon's choice. The sea shimmered like liquid silver beneath them.
We began with a rumor and an ocean.
He said, voice warm and sure.
Now we stand in a life we built with our own hands.
Tara leaned into him, the sixth finger of her right hand fitting perfectly against his heart.
And every day proved the council wrong,
She whispered.
Every tide carried us further from their fear.
They stood in silence, the horizon wide and endless, until the first stars pricked the deepening sky. So the story of the so-called cursed girl and the restless alpha closes where it began, beneath a vast moon and a sea that holds no chains. Tara, once exiled, became a founder whose courage fed generations. Kael, once weary of hollow courtship, found the truest partnership a soul could know. Together they turned rumor into destiny and loneliness into a world remade. Their love, born of patience and defiance, became the lasting heartbeat of Thornreach. Proof that what some call a flaw can become the very key to freedom, and that the greatest journeys begin when two lives refuse to accept the limits set by fear. And so, beneath moonlight that will outlast memory, their story settles into legend, not of exile, but of choice, not of curse, but of wonder, a life written in salt and silver, forever their own.